welcome to 30 Minute Reviews. I am Adam. Very tired today, as usual. I have gotten over COVID, so that's nice, which is great because it's one of those things where it's like if you work at 9 to 5 and then you go like 4 days without having to go to work for a full shift, and you're just working on other projects that you care about, it makes you go like, wow, I really don't want to ever go to work. Yeah, walk right down the middle of the street, asshole. Like, no desire to get up to work 9 to 5 for someone who isn't me at all. But here we are. We are going to do that anyway. What is today? Today we're going to talk about yesterday's big news and the day before's big news. I mean, really, it's more, the day before's big news is basically the eulogy of The Flash. We'll be ending with season 9, which, when you tell people that, it's like, wow, that show lasted 9 seasons. And I think the media coverage is a little bit, kind of against the CW Arrowverse, from what I can notice. Because, like, the way they portray ending after season 9 has been like it's being canceled. But it's like, well, no. I mean, how many other TV shows, let alone a TV show on the budget of this one, about, I think Smallville is probably the only one that lasted longer, and Smallville, 11 seasons. So it's been pretty, and Arrow never had the budget, never had the effects budget that The Flash needed to have. Because The Flash, you have someone who runs fast, and he's fighting metahumans and things like that. So you need a bigger budget. I don't think you necessarily needed as big a budget for Arrow, even if most of the arrows were CG. It's kind of interesting to see all that kind of play out, and how it's like, to end after season 9 is being played like a dirty word, where it's not like the show went for 9 years and did pretty phenomenally in ratings, because certain people who are like, oh, the ratings aren't great, are also the same people who are like, and everyone loves the Snyder Cut, and it's like, well, only like 300,000 more people watch the Snyder Cut than watch the premiere of The Flash, so do with that what you will. So what we're really here to talk about is the shelving of Batgirl, and to a lesser extent, the shelving of Scoob, Holiday Haunt, which I was all for what they were doing with Scoob. I never watched Scoob, which may be part of the problem as to why they canceled it, but Scoob, and the other thing is too, Scoob came out in the pandemic, so like if you're looking for something that didn't do well in theaters, it's an easy enough thing to point at and be like, oh, well, the theatrical performance was not great on this movie. But at the same time, it's like, okay, well, it did poorly in theaters, but why did it do poorly in theaters? And it's like, well, because it opened in the middle of a pandemic. It was scheduled for, like, May of 2020, when we were still, like, deep in the thick of the lockdowns. And then it ended up going to streaming. I think it went to HBO Max as an HBO Max title. But looking at Batgirl, and I think this is something that really pissed me off, because I ended up reading. I was at work when the news broke yesterday, and then I had therapy right after work, and I didn't record an episode yesterday because I wanted to get the full story. And as to be expected, the initial reporting was wrong. So what happened was, while Warner Brothers was Warner Brothers and owned by AT&T, and was its, this entity under AT&T, in an effort to bolster their streamer, AT&T greenlit a bunch of HBO Max movies that were reasonably expensive for HBO Max. So, like, the $75 million Wonder Twins movie was an HBO Max thing that got canned. Batgirl was $75 million, but ended up ballooning up to $95 million with COVID delays, and that was also meant to be HBO Max. Now that much money gets spent on a movie. Now when Discovery comes along and is like, wait, we now are in charge, and we're looking at this, and this, we spent this much money, we want this to go theatrical. So it was pulled from the HBO Max release slate, and then was presumed to be going theatrical at some point. We just didn't know when, because the initial plan was that first come out this December. However, The Flash was supposed to come out in November, and Michael Keaton's Batman was meant to be the Batman of that movie. It's closer to Batman Beyond than a real Batman origin. It's kind of or a Batgirl origin. It's kind of a mix of the two. So with The Flash getting delayed to July, it was presumed that Batgirl would also get delayed into next year, but no information was ever given. Then yesterday we find out that Batgirl has, instead of being delayed, been pulled from the schedule entirely and will never be released. Now, the movie is mostly done and was in post-production. And the initial reporting on this came from the New York Post. The New York Post reported on it, and for those who don't know, who aren't from the New York area, the New York Post is basically a tabloid, and it's owned by Rupert Murdoch. It's part of this weird news laundering thing that the Murdochs do, where they'll report on the New York Post, then Fox will report on it, then the Post will report on what Fox reported, and it'll just snowball from there into a giant snowball of ridiculousness. Now, as to be expected, a movie with a Batgirl that's played by a young Hispanic woman, directed by the directors of Bad Boys for Life and Ms. Marvel, was not exactly something that they were totally thrilled about. And while I don't know why they reported this, because it was very quickly invalidated by the powers that be. Very quickly they came forward and said, no, that's not true. They said that the movie was irredeemable and was in the test screening phases, and no matter what, there was no way to fix the movie, and the movie was irredeemably bad, and that's why they were pulling it from the release slate. And they were very quick to say, no, that's not the case, and they explained what happened. And what happened was they're trying to cut about $300 million from the budget of Warner Brothers, and they figured the easiest way to do that was to take this movie that was $95 million, never release it, and then take it as a tax write-off, which would do almost a third of what they're looking for. I'm not 100% on board with that, because if that's the case and you're looking for a $300 million tax write-off, you have one in the movie that is, featuring a guy who is accused of grooming multiple underage girls in the lead, and also is currently in a Charles Manson-esque compound in Vermont. I feel like that's the movie that should probably be canned, and that will get you closer to cutting that $300 million out, right there. And if that's all you're trying to do, if that's truly the case, and that's all you're trying to do is come up with a way to you have to not monetize it to do that. So it's not even like they can sell it to another studio. Although they could sell it to another studio for $10,000, and some other studio will take it and distribute. They could sell it to Universal for $10,000 and be like, okay, well, we're gonna get $94 million in change, and a tax write-off. But whatever, the movie's not coming out now because of that. And then on top of that, there was also reporting that the issue was the budget was a hindrance at this point. Now, the movie was intended for an HBO Max release and only had a $75 million, up to $95 million, with COVID delays, budget. So we're going to, for the sake of this, use the $75 million, because that extra $20 million did not go into making the effects look bigger or better or anything like that. As such, this is largely going to be a grounded story, because it is basically Batman Beyond, but with Batgirl instead of Terry. And in that space, she's fighting Firefly. And I think that the thing with that is you can do that on a $75 million budget, and you can do that pretty well, and it'll look pretty good. The issue with that is that you can do it on that low of a budget, and it'll look fine on TVs, But if you're trying to move that to theatrical after spending that much money, it's not going to look good on an IMAX screen or on a Dolby screen, which is what Discovery wanted to do with the DC movies. They want to eventize them in the same way that Marvel eventizes their movies. And unlike Marvel, who is very comfortable spending $200 million on a show on a streamer, DC is not, or Warner Brothers is not comfortable spending that level of money. And also, we haven't really seen an outcome for how that works financially for Marvel. We can see that people are okay with going between the two, as evidenced by Multiverse of Madness doing what it did at the box office. But the issue is, we don't really know financially how well that worked out for them, how much of that converted into new subscribers and all of that. It's kind of an interesting thing to look at. If you take a serious and deep look at why that happened, the issue is, I don't think it's right to anyone involved in this movie to not release it, even if it is for a tax write-off. And I think the fact that it is just for a tax write-off is part of the problem. Like, if it was, the movie is irredeemable in quality, I could see them wanting to pull it, because it's like, well, DC films have not been great. And instead of doing what Warner Brothers used to do, which was sink a lot of money into, re-editing the movie, like, famously the Suicide Squad from 2016, the David Ayer one, was, cut by the company that cut the trailer. After test screenings showed audiences were not properly responding to the movie. Justice League had 2 different directors on it. And when they did let Zack Snyder do his thing, with Batman v Superman and Man of Steel, they were not widely respected by the community at large. Like, it had its small vocal fan base, bolstered by the fact that Zack Snyder himself was paying for bots and paying for reviews. The exact thing that the Snyder cult accused, Disney of doing is what it turned out Zack Snyder himself was doing. But the point is, they're not willing to take that risk. They're not willing to take that financial risk on a DC movie. They need to come out with movies that are going to fix the brand, for lack of a better word. And I think they're looking to quality over quantity. Meanwhile, at Marvel, they're just like, let's pump out 4 movies a year and hope for the best. Eventually, you may not like this one, but there will be something down the line you will like. And the thing is, Marvel can afford to take that, because if they put $200 million into a movie and they get out $500 million, which they're almost guaranteed to, they've made a profit on it. So even like Eternals, where it's like Eternals didn't make the money, it's like, alright, whatever, that's not the worst thing on the planet, because there were 4 other Marvel movies that in recent proximity that they did make money on. But if you look at, like, the issue with DC right now is that DC there's no confidence in DC. And I think that's why, I think that pulling Batgirl, when all anyone has seen about the movie or heard about the movie, even up until the press tour recently for Ms. Marvel, was that it's great, it's coming, get ready, we love it. Because that's the thing, too. Hold on one second. But I think, with all things being equal, I think taking a tax write-off on this movie is not a great look in general. Because of all the movies that you could have done it with, that are done and in the can and ready to go, it doesn't make sense to me that this is the one you would do it with, when there are movies with much bigger budgets that will, may not be, that's going to be the thing. It's like, say next year The Flash comes out, and The Flash is absolutely detested. Or it doesn't respond with audiences, because again, Ezra Miller is in his situation that he's in. And it is a perfectly likely possibility that people will watch The Flash and be like, oh, this is weird, why is he in this movie still? Especially if there is a campaign to be like, oh, that's weird. Shut the fuck up, progressive thing. It is the kind of thing where it's like, why is that why is that the line that we're drawing where it's like, okay, so this one, it's like the idea that, like, people wouldn't go and see a $95 million superhero movie is kind of laughable. Like, and okay, you're gonna say no to this, but you're gonna greenlight Joker, which is, like, Joker's not a spectacle movie, and Joker 2 is almost certainly not a spectacle movie either. Like, if you're looking to make money, then why is it that you're ditching this project? Like, if you're moving it to theatrical and you're looking to make money, if this movie makes $300 million, you've turned a profit. And unless there's another pandemic, you're gonna make $300 million. From Keaton alone, I feel like. Because people have been asking for Keaton in a Batman Beyond movie for almost a decade at this point. I remember very early on in the podcast, and granted we're turning 7 on Saturday, but very early on in the podcast, it was voiced that they should do a Batman Beyond movie with Michael Keaton as Batman and Timothy Chalamet as Terry McGinnis. And that would be a great way to tell that story. Problem being, well, that's unfortunate. Feel bad for whoever's having an incident that they need help with, because there's a train coming, so that EMS vehicle can't get through. But looking at, like, you know, all things being equal, I feel like there were other movies that could have been pulled from the schedule and never released, even though it's already done. Like, unless they're going to do that, take that $95 million and use it to put Grant into The Flash. Like, the fact of the matter is, if you're trying to cut $300 million from your budget, that right there is $200 million. Like, that would go a longer way. I'm not entirely sure why they are so committed to The Flash coming out. Like, unless they're that confident in the movie, and they're that confident that Ezra Miller can stay out of the headlines between now and July of next year, I don't think it's likely, though. Because since the first incident with him punching the woman at the Fan Expo, he hasn't been able to stay out of headlines. We're not talking about someone who has been largely quiet, then all of a sudden the stuff broke. We've been watching a slow descent of someone who, you know, has a pattern of behavior, has been expressing that pattern of behavior, and has not shown any intention of changing said pattern of behavior. So my question is, why is there an expectation that things will change? Like, he's on the, like, they're on the run. I keep misgendering them. I'm sorry for that. It's not on purpose. But they're currently on the run from the police, and the police, he said, he put up something on his Instagram their Instagram that was like, "Good luck finding me. I'm in another universe." Like, on what planet is this normal behavior? And we're just like, all right, that's fine. Like, it's not normal behavior. It's not. It's ridiculous on just about every level. I don't understand the confusion. As, like, that's what I'm most confused by. If I'm being completely honest, that's what I'm most confused by. It is this idea that this movie has to come out no matter what, but nothing else is flexible. Also, I'm not entirely thrilled about Batman being in Fallen Kingdom, or Aquaman: The Lost Kingdom. Fallen Kingdom was the Jurassic World movie. I don't think we need Batman in everything. I certainly don't think we need Ben Affleck's Batman in everything. I certainly don't think we need Ben Affleck's Batman in everything in a world where we're coming off these reports about the Snyder, cultists and what Snyder was doing when he was wielding his power. I don't think any of that is necessary. Like at this point, if we're this far into production, considering that the movie was meant to and was originally scheduled to have come out this year, Remember that. It is now August. 4 months from now was the original release date for this movie. It was supposed to come out on in August. I think in December. I want to say Christmas weekend. And that movie is not coming out now. We don't entirely, like, it got delayed, which is fine. Delayed can be good. Like a delayed, I like the, what's it called? I think it was Masuda. Not Masuda, it was either Iwata or Morimoto that said, a bad game is always bad, but a delayed game could eventually be good, and I'm all for that. But I think that if at this phase we're delaying the game this far, we're delaying the movie out, and then we're like, and we're going to add in a bunch of other stuff too. We're going to add in Batman. It's like, well, that tells me the test screenings weren't great, and that $200 million movie probably could have been canned. That's what that tells me. If you need to add Batman 4 months out from the initial release, it tells me you fucked up somewhere. And maybe it wasn't just to offset Amber Heard. But on that note, we will wrap up there for today. We'll be back with more stuff as it happens. Maybe something special on Saturday, who knows. But until then, have a great rest of your week.